Colonial rule had a profound impact on African economic development. In his book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Guyanese historian and political activist Walter Rodney argued that colonialism was not just a system of exploitation, but that its objective was to repatriate profits to the colonizing country. The result of this was a dialectical process in which Europe was becoming developed while Africa was being underdeveloped. Rodney stated that the colonial administration became an economic exploiter, playing the lead role in expatriating African surplus to Europe and imposing taxes on Africans as a way of incorporating them into the money economy. In West Africa and parts of East Africa, where much land was still in the hands of the Africans, they developed a peasant statist economy where Africans were forced to grow cash crops. These regions became a source of cheap raw materials, and the colonial state determined the type of commodities to be produced as well as their prices. In British West Africa, cocoa and ground nuts became the main cash crops, while in East Africa, particularly Uganda, it was cotton. For French West Africa, the main export was palm oil and peanuts. In Southern Africa and in Kenya, there was a settler economy, largely organized around agriculture and dependent upon African labor. Here, agriculture was controlled by the white minority settlers who appropriated land from the majority Africans. The settler economy of Southern Africa also involved mining, which, just like the settler agriculture, was dependent upon African labor. When Southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, changed from company rule to responsible government in 1923, many policies were implemented to limit African economic potential. The Land Apportionment Act of 1930 is an example of such policies. The Land Apportionment Act also led to separate purchase lands for Africans and Europeans, and the establishment of what was called native purchase areas. These native purchase areas, however, represented a small portion of land in Southern Rhodesia, which meant that without agricultural land to produce cash crops, Africans would be forced to go into low-paid wage labor. In South Africa, the white minority government also undermined African economic growth, especially in agriculture and land ownership. Initially, black agriculturalists had been successful in engaging in the capitalist economy. However, an independent African peasantry threatened the labor supplies needed by the mining industries and competed with the white farmers for markets. To undermine this African peasantry, the growing mineral industry and the capitalist economy were used to restructure the relationships of the peasantry with the white settlers. The White Minority Union government, which was created in 1910, used its political powers to pass laws that undercut the African peasantry. An example of such laws was the 1913 Native Land Act, which allocated only 7% of arable land to Africans while reserving the rest of the land for the white minority. Although the appropriation of African land went as far back as the 1800s, the impact of the 1913 Land Act continued into the 1920s and 1930s.